This is The Weekly Set, an official podcast of TheTotalScreen.com.
I wish I was the monster you think I am.
You have come here to beseech me?
Yet. Yes. For your soul.
Madness can be a medicine for the modern world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Weekly Set, the official podcast of The Total Screen. I'm your host. My name is Tyson, and joining me today, as always, is my partner in crime here at The Total Screen, William Rohrig.
Hello.
So today, this is episode 278 of the podcast. Last week, we finished Lovecraft Country. Week before that, we finished The Boys. Next week, we're doing The Mandalorian. We're starting The Mandalorian. So what the fuck are we going to talk about today? Well, we thought today would be a good opportunity to talk about coronavirus. So we're not going to just talk about the virus in general. We're going to talk about the effect it has had on entertainment. And we're not even going to limit that to TV. We're going to talk about how it's affected movies, TV, anime, games, like so many different things that have been affected by this. And so right off the bat, we can just say universal delays.
Universal delays.
Nearly every show, movie, whatever that was already, even the ones that were already done were heavily delayed. Fargo was almost done, like it was in its last stages of post-production, I believe. And then they fucking delayed it like 4 months or something. It was delayed from April, 5 months, April to September. Most of the fall season was delayed until winter. So there's stuff that was supposed to be coming out now or even earlier, like in September. It's not going to be coming out until like January now. You even had shows like Supernatural that like ran its first half of the season and then it was supposed to come back. Like the Supernatural was supposed to end in May and now it's going to be ending in November. So it's ending in the next season.
Yeah, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. So it's like it was on its final season and now it's ending the next season over. That's for TV. For movies? Oh my, Jesus Christ.
Oh, movies got bodied. You know, like, it's hilarious. Wonder Woman was supposed to be out by now.
Yeah.
There were like Doritos. There was a Doritos promotion over the summer with Wonder Woman.
Black Widow.
On the Doritos
ramping
bags.
up for release.
Well, there was a promotion over summer with Doritos. Wonder Woman was on the Doritos bag to promote the movie. And the movie's not out. I think like the movie was supposed to be out in the summer, then they delayed it to fall. Now they delayed it again to December.
And these movies are done. Like effects done everything. They've been sitting in the can.
And movies have a bigger problem than TV right now. It's because TV doesn't depend on people crowding into a theater to watch it. The whole movie model is dependent on the theaters, and people can't go into theaters because of COVID, and the theaters are hurting. AMC is like on the brink of filing for bankruptcy.
They were already close to that even before the coronavirus. They were already struggling, and this just hit them hard.
Yeah. And the biggest, and you can't release a movie in this climate. The biggest example of that is Tenet. Like after several delays, Warner Brothers said, okay, let's roll the dice. Let's release this thing and see how it does. It
51 million domestic.
It did not do well.
I mean, 51 million domestic when I was a kid, that would have been considered a big thing.
Not
51
today.
million domestic now isn't even like, that's probably like a fourth or less of the budget of the movie.
That's probably why they delayed Wonder Woman again.
Yeah.
Because
so
they were
Tenet was like, we knew Tenet was not going to be released digital. Here's the thing. They can say, okay, we can put the movies out in foreign release where movie theaters had already reopened. We can wait and put these movies off, which is what we're talking about most movies doing here. Or we could do what Disney's done with a lot of their stuff now, which is just say, fuck it, put it on Disney Plus or put it up for purchase, you know?
It's kind of incredible because like early on, like we've seen some of that, but we've also seen studios like being really stubborn about doing that. Like,
oh yeah, because they have these contracts with movie theaters and shit too. That it's a big issue.
They do. Yeah, it's a big issue. But like we just saw Disney come out and say like they've refocused their whole entertainment brand on streaming.
Yeah,
they said,
who's gonna fight them?
Yeah,
you know,
Disney just came out and said streaming is our top priority now. Movie theaters are secondary.
So we could go over this a little bit. So, for example, Artemis Fowl was supposed to be a summer movie, ended up releasing on Disney Plus. Onward actually did get a theatrical release. That was the last movie I watched in theaters. I was in Houston. We talked about this, you and I have, but I took a vacation right around the time the lockdown started happening. Like when I was coming home, we were like panicked, like on the plane, like wiping down all these surfaces and stuff. And then we got home and immediately went into lockdown. Like we came home on March 14th. That tells you how close it was. Cause like the lockdown kind of started around March 11th, I think. We went to, when we didn't realize it was that bad because we were traveling and stuff. So we weren't like doing that, like honed in on the news thing. So we went and saw, my mom and I went and saw Onward in theaters. It had released like a week before, I think. And we went and saw it on the 13th or the 12th, I think, of March. And the theater was completely empty. They're like, we were the only people there. And, we went to the parking lot was empty. It was pretty crazy, but we weren't too scared yet at the time. Cause like I said, we just hadn't like gotten into that point where we were honing in on the news. So that Onward had like 2-3 weeks of release before the theaters were basically shut down. And then that ended up coming over to Disney Plus. Frozen 2 was supposed to, I don't think that got a theatrical release at all. And it came around the same time as Onward to Disney Plus. And then we have Pixar, the new Pixar movie Souls is coming straight to Disney Plus, which is a big deal because, it's a new Pixar movie. Onward at least got some time of a theatrical release, but Souls is going to get like none of it. It's going straight to digital, and that's probably like a $200 million movie, or more. And then you also have Disney experimented with Mulan, and people were making fun of that because they were saying you have to have Disney Plus and then you also have to pay like $30. And then you have like a 3-month window in which you can watch this, and then afterwards everybody with Disney Plus gets it. And people are like, who the fuck's gonna buy that? Like record numbers. That movie sold so well.
Right, exactly. It did. People actually did it, which is okay. I personally wouldn't do that.
Well, it's family. See, like $30 and on top of Disney Plus sounds like a lot, but like, let's say you're a family of 4. That's not that much. Right? A day out at the movies would be a lot more than that.
Yeah, but I don't know. I wouldn't.
Yeah, I wouldn't either.
That's just me. So yeah, you got.
We're not the audience for that.
Bill and Ted did a simultaneous release on digital.
32 million from digital, 3.4 million from theatrical.
That did pretty well. We saw drive-in theaters make somewhat of a comeback. Walmart started leasing out some of their parking lots for drive-in theaters.
I think that was actually kind of like less than I thought that would happen with drive-ins.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
I thought we'd be seeing because Walmart did that, but they only did it with 100 of their stores. I thought that would have been they would have done that at all their stores. They would have had a huge monopoly on that. That would have been because they have the space.
Maybe they were just being cautious. I don't know.
But yeah, it's interesting. What's more interesting, I think, with drive-in isn't movies, but it's like stand-up comedy and stuff. Like I saw a stand-up comedian play with a drive-in thing. Like we went to it was a parking lot of the Hollywood Bowl and watched a stand-up perform on a stage in front of a bunch of cars. So he'd tell a funny joke and people would honk. It was really surreal. And he was taping a comedy special too. So that's going to be a comedy special that's eventually going to be released.
Nice.
And that's apparently been a big thing, stand-up performances, concerts. And now we're getting political rallies that are being done with drive-in style. Have you seen any of the Biden rally stuff, or he'll make a big point and you'll just hear cars honking?
I saw the Obama one.
Yeah, it's cars honking when he makes a good point. It's
yeah, that's pretty funny actually.
So weird.
Let's see.
Another one we can talk about pretty quickly is anime. So I'm a subscriber on Crunchyroll, which has most of the anime TV series come to Crunchyroll in the US. So I watch every anime season. I'll watch 3 or 4 different shows or something. Usually there's a pick of 40 shows that are new every season. So 4 seasons a year, every season there's 40 something shows that you can go through on Crunchyroll and go, okay, I'll watch this one, check out a few. And you watch a bunch and then you go like, of those ones you watch, maybe like a few of them you continue to watch. Well, like for, I think the summer season, they had something like 10 shows. Like instead of like 30, 40, they had like 10 shows. It's just, they just weren't able to do it. And that doesn't require people to like gather and film on a set or something. That's all work that could be done at home. But the transition from working in an office to working to home is going to cause like issues like that, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Like, yeah, that's disruptive. Japan especially was not prepared for, something where they had to switch to a work from home situation.
Mm-hmm.
That's had a huge impact on Japanese companies during this.
Yeah. Japan's notoriously like people don't have a lot of space in their homes and stuff. So work from home environments are kind of rough, to do it when you have like a very small amount of space to work. You know, if you're working at home, you don't have much space to work in, you know?
Right.
Video games, we got some delays and stuff, but the main thing with video games is it's probably the least transparent of the entertainment industry. So it's hard to tell what was delayed because of COVID and what was delayed just because video games are constantly delayed, you know?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say. What we can say, like, is all the conventions were canceled.
E3 was the big one. Yeah.
All the big industry events were canceled and moved to like, kind of like different, you know, like, I guess like video presentations became like a lot more of a thing.
E3 was the big one, of course. So it's like every year is the biggest one. And even if companies don't attend E3, they tend to have events around that same time. But like E3 just was weird this year because you'd have like, you know, some people were like, okay, well, we have everything we were going to do at our E3 presentation. So we'll just do it around then anyways. And then other companies like Nintendo were like, well, let's just divide it up over the next like 6 months. We'll just like announce one game every month or something, you know, like, and just do like these little mini reveals, like, and just do no big event at all, you know?
Right.
And then, but what's really weird about that also with video games is that we have 2 next gen systems launching this year. And so that's usually like a huge thing for like something like E3. Like whenever the game systems are launching, that's like a big deal. And to do it through presentations this year was really weird. You know, nobody got to really get as much hands-on time with it as before. And because of that, you're getting things like people are unboxing and doing reviews and stuff on PS5 and stuff like now. I don't think we ever would have gotten that kind of stuff coming out this early in a different console launch, but they have to do that because they need the journalists to have time to have their hands on the system because they weren't able to do it like at any events like E3 or anything.
Right. Exactly.
My favorite of the different kind of entertainment stories as far as like the way COVID has affected things. And I don't watch soap operas, and normally we wouldn't talk about soap operas on this show, but man, the soap opera story.
Okay. Tell me the soap opera story.
So this started with The Bold and the Beautiful, which is one of those soap operas that's been running for probably about 70 years nonstop. They were like the first ones to return to filming, but in order to fit into the safety protocol, they obviously, I mean, what do you think of when you think of soap opera? It's all like love scenes and shit.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Can't do that, you know? Obviously that's not going to work. So what they did is they had people bring on their significant others to double as their characters, like the people they're with their characters. So they'd film the two characters from different angles, and then they would have like when they'd have like the guy kiss the girl, they would show from the actress's angle. She'd be kissing her husband or something. And the actor, maybe he's single, doesn't live with anybody at home. And so he'd be like kissing like a mannequin. So they did like just weird stuff like that. And then they did other things where they would have a scene where they weren't intimate, but where they'd be having a conversation. And they couldn't have them that close where they could have like a realistic conversation scene between them. So they would literally just do like a split screen. And so first they'd film like half the frame with one actor on one side, and then they would film the other half of it and just literally put a divider up in the middle. So if like there's like a mishap of of the light. Like, let's say there's like a house plant or something and the leaf like jingles a little bit and it causes the shadow to move and it happens to cross that dividing line. You'd literally see like part of the shadow move and the other part not. Because they literally just put up a fucking divide right between the two frames.
That's pretty hilarious.
Yeah. So it's just like, it's a creative way of getting around it. And it's not something that's going to really work out well for like high quality filmmaking or anything, but it's a freaking soap opera. You know? So what do you expect? I just thought that was hilarious. Just the idea of people like making out with mannequins or, you know, like I think it would have been hilarious if they didn't even bother to try to match it. And like, let's say one of the actresses that's like, she has a romance with a man in the show, but maybe she's like in real life, she's a lesbian or something. And so she goes to like kiss the man and then you see like from her perspective and she's literally kissing a woman or something. You know? I think that would have been even funnier if they just said, fuck it. Like, let's just let people use their imaginations and we'll just fucking do it this way. You know, I think it would have been even better, but I think it's pretty funny the way they ended up, the solution they ended up coming to.
That's pretty amusing, actually. Yeah.
So let's kind of move on to the main crux of what we talked about on our podcast, which is TV, which is, I think, has had, you know, just in sheer volume, had like the most interesting cases of, what's going on with the COVID stuff. So let's talk about what I call COVID-salations. COVID cancellations, and these in particular, these aren't just shows that were canceled because like COVID happened and then the show was canceled. Maybe it was COVID, maybe it wasn't. These are cases in which the show was actively renewed or put into production. Sometimes it was even in the process of filming. Like, I think Glow is one of the examples. I think that was like 3 weeks into filming.
Glow is probably I'm looking at the list and Glow is the only one that I care about. That stings, cause like, I was looking forward to season 4. I was looking forward to that show ending on its own terms. Mm-hmm. And now, because I enjoyed the show, genuinely. And we've talked about before on this podcast. It was a good show and sad to see it ending like this.
It's one of those shows that just, some shows they can restart up with COVID still in effect and take some safety measures and go, okay, we can get around this and film this. Glow is a show about wrestling. Yeah. You can't.
There's a lot of physicality again. It's the same problem you were just talking about with the soap operas, except they can't just work around it.
Well, they're not going to do something cheesy like that either. Like that's not going to be acceptable on a show like Glow where it would be on a soap opera.
Right. That's true.
Like they're not going to have like the character like wrestling with a dummy or something.
So yeah, it's been shelved. Mark Maron went on record saying that he thinks they should just do season 4 as a movie and wrap up the storyline, but who knows?
This brings up the tricky issue because I think what people think when they hear about these kind of cancellations off the bat is they think like, oh, well, why don't they just delay it? Well, the problem is like contracts. You have your cast and your crew, you have the people you have involved, you have the places that you've booked to film at. All of these kind of things are within a very tight windows. And when something like this comes up, that gets all blown out. So like, if half your cast can't do this, like let's say you say, oh, we'll just delay the season until next year. But let's say Alison Brie is filming a movie that's on schedule to begin filming then, and she's already signed the contract to start doing that. Let's say, Betty Gibson is, gonna be doing another TV show where she's like playing the lead in some other TV show, and it was gonna be fine because this was gonna be the final season of Glow and everything would have lined up. But now she's like gonna be deep into this production by the time they'd be able to do it. And so she's not gonna have any time to do that, you know? You get things like that. It just makes it that even with a delay, it doesn't guarantee you're going to be able to get it done anymore. Scheduling is so important in like Hollywood, and this just threw all of that out the window. So yeah, that's what's really hurting stuff here. Isn't so much COVID in itself, because that would just cause delays. Like if COVID was the only problem, you would just have delays. The real problem is that these shows, like they have tight schedules, they have contracts that, that's the stuff that's causing the issues. Because now once you add a delay onto that, half your principal cast can't do it, then what are you going to do?
Right, exactly. There's not much you can do.
Yeah. Glow was the only one that kind of mattered for you. There were a few that mattered for me. Some other ones that really mattered for me are like, I am not okay with this. You and I both watched that. You didn't really like it, but I did.
I'm going to say, I don't think the show should have ended where it ended.
On a cliffhanger.
Yeah, on a cliffhanger. So like for people who were like into that show, like I get it.
Yeah.
It's just, I wasn't a big fan of that show anyway, so it's not too devastating for me. And the rest of these shows, like, I haven't watched a single episode of any of this stuff.
Teenage Bounty Hunters was really good.
Yeah, I heard, like, I was actually going to check that out before they announced the cancellation.
Now
so
it might not be worth even checking, you know?
Right, yeah.
Because, I mean, it does have some level of closure, but it also kind of leaves, there's like a big revelation at the end that would have been a big play into the next season, and now it's like, okay, well, I guess that's gone, you know?
Right.
Another big one for me is like Stumptown, which is, you know, it's like a week-to-week kind of procedural, but it was like one of the more fun ones.
Uh-huh.
So I kind of enjoyed that. That one's still being shopped around, so that one might still end up somewhere, you know? But ABC canceled that. All the other ones we mentioned so far, by the way, were Netflix. In addition to those, there's also The Society was canceled by Netflix. Messiah was canceled by Netflix. So Netflix had a bunch of these cancellations. But I mean, if you look at the number of shows they have in production at any given time, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise.
Right, yeah. Netflix greenlights a ridiculous number of shows, every year, so.
So by sheer, like, numbers, like, proportionally, like, having half the list be Netflix makes sense. Some other kind of notable ones. There was a show called I'm Sorry on True TV that was pretty good. That got canceled. On Becoming a God in South Central, Florida. And then there were some new shows. There's the Lincoln Lawyer at CBS based on the movie. And I think there was a book as well of the same name.
Haven't watched the movie, haven't watched the show.
Well, the show it never existed. This is like it was in production for the first season.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's what I'm talking about now. The ones I'm talking about now are all like new shows. So
that's even more of a who cares.
Yeah. But some of them were pretty high profile. Evil was at USA, pronounced or spelled EVL.
This is literally my first time hearing about that.
This is, well, I mean, they didn't even get to the point where they could promote it yet, you know, but this was going to be a show about Evel Knievel. And it had, Milo Ventimiglia, I don't know how to pronounce his name, who is in the show This Is Us. And that's basically why he can't do it, because the scheduling, change because of COVID meant that his contract for This Is Us takes priority legally, and so he can't do it. So that's it. The show's wiped off the board. It was a pretty, like a big deal show. They were going to be working on a miniseries about Evel Knievel. There was a show at Amazon, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce. It was a 4-episode miniseries starring Javier Bardem. That's gone. Americana is a show at HBO, was ordered to series, and it had Lupita Nyong'o from Black Panther was in it.
Right.
Canceled again, you know, because of her schedule, because she's in a bunch of movies and stuff. She's a very busy actress. She fit in her schedule very tightly to get this show done. It's not going to work, you know?
Right.
Any kind of delay, that's it. Another one I know a lot of people are probably going to be sad about is Drunk History. And they had already begun filming this. And they were, I think, like 3 episodes into filming, and then they just canceled it. You brought up to me before we started this podcast that even though this particular show was canceled because of COVID, like it was going to have one last season and then that season was canceled, that a lot of the cancellations that are happening at Comedy Central are their relation to COVID is only that shows are ending sooner than they would have before, not that they're ending. Like they were already going to end. They have a new person in charge and they're restructuring their lineup. So a lot of these shows, like Drunk History, was going to end anyways, but it was going to have one last season, and now it's not even going to have that. Yeah, so those are the COVID cancellations. So if any of those shows were something you were interested in, I'm sorry. This is just, it's the nature of the beast. Everything's about scheduling in the industry. And if something like COVID comes up and throws a wrench in scheduling, that's enough to like kill a show.
We're sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. We're sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, yeah.
South Park reference there, but, Next up we have, and this is interesting because we talked about cancellations, delays, all that kind of stuff, all this bad news, but then we have an interesting phenomenon of what we call COVID creation.
There's a silver lining. There's a silver lining to this.
These are like new shows or specials, things that have come about because of COVID. So, some of these are just like a special episode of a series that they just did in a radically different way because it was the only way they could do it. And some of them are like reunions for shows that just never would have happened otherwise. A perfect example of that would be Parks and Recreation.
I think a reunion probably would have happened eventually, but like
maybe, but it would have been years off.
Yeah.
It would have been maybe like 10 years away, you know?
That seems to be like the big new thing now. I see like a lot of reunions on YouTube.
Yeah.
Of all kinds.
Because all these actors have nothing to do and they're at home.
Yeah, exactly. We got reunions for Park and Recreation. We got
a weird like 30 Rock one. It was like an upfront presentation / reunion.
Apparently there's some controversy around that. Some of the affiliate stations got pissed because they thought they saw it like as they saw it as like blatant advertisement for Peacock, the streaming service, and
they need to get over that. This is the way things are going to move in the future.
Yeah. So apparently they got pissed and they refused to air this. Yeah.
So concerned, but this is, Upfronts is something that happens every year anyways. They just decide to televise it and do one with the 30 Rock theme, which was pretty weird, pretty funny.
Very meta.
Yeah, which fits the show.
Yeah.
The Parks and Rec one I really loved. I thought that was great. Seeing all the characters again. I thought they found clever ways of getting around the whole, the distancing thing. Like they had Andy and April are like a couple in the show. They're like married, but they had to film them separately because obviously in real life they're not married.
Right.
So like Chris Pratt, for example, like locked himself in the garage. So everything was like him stumbling around in the dark in the garage trying to video conference with people because they couldn't, have like him and April on the same set because, they're not actually married in real life. So yeah, they did some really kind of clever, fun stuff. It was really funny. If you like Parks and Recreation, it ended up really working. It fit with all the themes. But they did a bunch of like other stuff that was interesting. There's a show called All Rise, and this is a show I don't really have any interest in, but they did an episode called Dancing at Los Angeles, and they filmed it distant, and the episode itself was about a courtroom having to do their proceedings, distant.
Oh, okay.
So they were able to get away with it because of that, because, you're gonna reflect real life, like even court is gonna have to try to do certain things like this, And so that's the concept they did for that. And what's interesting about that also is that this comes into the next category of things we're going to talk about in just a little bit, which is shortened seasons. So All Rise was supposed to be 22 seasons, which is pretty standard. It got shortened to 20, and then this one was added on. This socially distanced filmed one became its season finale. So it's just kind of like an interesting story of how that kind of came about. Mythic Quest. Have you watched that show at all? Mythic Quest, Raven's Play? That's that tie-in one on Apple TV.
No, I don't have Apple TV Plus. I haven't watched it.
So they filmed an episode with iPhones that was all about the in-universe effect of the pandemic on the characters.
Right.
So that's kind of a lot of what you're going to end up getting is like directly referencing coronavirus and when the characters within it as the episode is filmed using like social distancing. You got another way of handling this was One Day at a Time. So One Day at a Time is interesting because obviously that's like a remake of an old show from like the 70s, but it was on Netflix. Netflix canceled it. It got picked up by Pop. I think Pop has now canceled it and it got picked up by somebody else. I'm not sure, but they did an episode where they animated it because they couldn't do it socially distanced. They said, well, we can just call in and get everyone's voiceover remotely and then just animate an episode. And they said, well, if they're going to animate it, let's do it like a special. So they did a special about politics, having to do with the election, and they just animated the whole thing. They did an animated episode. Wouldn't that be weird if we just end up getting a bunch of like animated episodes of shows?
That would be really weird. Yeah.
This would have been a good time for Supernatural to do a follow-up of the Scooby-Doo episode, Just do something like that. It's just going to be interesting to see if anybody else kind of takes this direction. Another thing was South Park did a pandemic special. They usually come back and they have a short season and they work very quickly. But in order to do this remotely, they obviously couldn't get the same kind of production and to do a season. So instead of doing a season, they just did like a 1 hour special. And it ended up being like one of the highest rated episodes of South Park in like a decade.
Oh yeah. I believe it.
So
that one was hyped for sure.
And then lastly, there's a series of shows that have come out that are created specifically about the pandemic and in reference to the pandemic from the very beginning. So these aren't like special episodes of existing shows, but like new shows about the pandemic.
Right.
There's a show called Love in the Time of Corona at Freeform, which is like a perfect title because there was a movie the really famous movie and book called Love in the Time of Cholera, you know? So this is Love in the Time of Corona.
Right.
Genji Kohan, who did Weeds and Orange is the New Black and also worked on Glow. She wasn't the showrunner, but she worked on that. Put together a show called Social Distance. It was like kind of a mini series that was all filmed remotely, individually by people with like stories about these individual people's lives. And then NBC put together like a comedy called Connecting, which I don't think has come out yet. But it's an upcoming show that's also about social distancing. So now we're going to have like new shows about social distancing. And it's just weird to think that like almost every show we watch outside of like fantasy stuff, like they're obviously not going to reference the pandemic on like the next season of The Witcher, you know, but anything we watch that's is modern is going to have to like address at some point the pandemic.
Right.
And that's just kind of weird to think about.
Yeah,
know?
It's kind of, well, it's part of the culture.
Part of life. Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of life. So yeah, it's gonna be a thing in our fiction as well.
Yeah. It'll have a huge influence. Big events will affect things, even things outside of modern stuff. I mean, Lord of the Rings was heavily affected by like World War II and stuff, you know?
Right.
So we might see like themes that come from kind of like the paranoia that comes from a lockdown in things that aren't even modern. Like we could have a story that's like a science fiction show taking place in the year 3000 or a fantasy series, you know, taking place in a different realm, and it will be influenced by what we've just gone through and what we're continuing to go through. So it'll be interesting to see like what new stuff ends up kind of developing from that and what people end up saying influence those choices. I mentioned earlier when we talked about All Rise about shows that had shortened seasons. So I made like a kind of small list of some of those. As I said, All Rise got shortened from 22 to 20 and then had an additional 21st episode put together that was distant. AP Bio on Peacock had their order reduced to 8 from 10. All the Arrowverse shows, so Batwoman, The Flash, Supergirl, all got reduced from 22 to 20. This kind of tells you around when production works too, that they were near the end of production when all this shit happened, basically. The Blacklist got shortened from 22 to 19, and apparently they're going to be doing their 19th episode is going to be making heavy use of voiceover and CGI to finish that episode out so that they can come to a closure. I'm wondering if they're going to do that as a stylistic thing where they're going to like, you know, I don't know, it's a killer from virtual reality or some stupid shit like that. Or if they're going to like just literally use CG to like recreate people in the way that like Marvel will like de-age, you know, Robert Downey Jr. in Civil War, you know?
Yeah, I have no idea.
It'll be interesting to see what they come up with, like how they use the CG, if it's written into the story or if it's not, you know?
Right.
It'll just suddenly be like a CG show. It'll be like a like a DreamWorks animated show for like one episode, just randomly with no explanation.
Yeah, there you go.
The show Empire, I don't watch this, but anybody who does is probably a little bit saddened. It was in its final season. It got its order reduced from 20 to 18, which meant the ending had to have been probably rushed. So that's the kind of stuff that sucks when you're like on the last season. I mean, but at least you got like part of a last season, like Glow, you know, as we mentioned, just isn't going to get its last season at all.
Yeah.
New Amsterdam got its order reduced from 22 to 18. It was going to be 19, but one of the episodes was pulled for sensitivity. New Amsterdam's like a medical show, so it's probably had something to do with the virus.
Okay, probably.
And Riverdale got their order cut from 22 to 19.
All shows I do not care about.
Yeah. What's going to be interesting is like the shows that are kind of back into production a little bit late and stuff. Like Witcher season 2 is filming right now, overseas, where the restrictions aren't as strong as they are in America. We mentioned before when we talked about The Boys on the podcast that Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who plays like Negan in The Walking Dead and played, Papa Winchester on Supernatural.
Yeah. Eric Kripke really wants him for a cameo on The Boys, but because of COVID, they can't make it work.
Well, they don't even know yet if they can make it work, but it's not looking likely, basically.
Right.
And the trick here is that it's not that they can't film it. They can film it, but the problem is that because Jeffrey Dean Morgan is a regular on The Walking Dead, that's his priority. So he could only go up for a limited amount of time. But in order to film in Canada, where The Boys films, they have to do he would have to like cross the border and then like self-quarantine in a hotel for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's just incredibly difficult to do.
He was gonna fly down for like 1 or 2 days of filming, and he would have to be in self-quarantine in Canada for 2 weeks before they'd even begin filming. That just is undoable.
Yeah,
so unless the pandemic comes to an end, or they change policies, or maybe Eric Kripke finds a way to like film his parts remotely, I don't know. Unless they do something along those lines, like we're gonna have this, what would have been probably a great cameo,
maybe
be scrapped.
Maybe in a future season.
Yeah, it would be nice. It would have been cool because in the same season you would have had, Dean Winchester and his dad.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, this is just the world we live in. So that's pretty much it. I mean, is there anything else that you noticed that you wanted to bring up about Corona effect on any of the stuff we watch or play?
I think we've pretty much covered everything at this point. It's been pretty thorough.
Yeah. So the main thing is to remember, if you're frustrated because your show got canceled or something, a show that you watched got canceled, and you're like, why couldn't they just delay it? Just remember that like it's more about schedules than about the virus itself. It's about the way the virus has caused a delay in schedules, and with everybody's schedules delayed, not like one actor's, but literally everybody's schedules delayed. Some stuff just doesn't make sense to keep it going. They would have to pay penalties on contracts to do delays in filming and stuff, and it just becomes not worth it for them to do it. And for every show we lose that we loved, that's just an opening for more shows to fill their place that, maybe we'll love, maybe we won't, but that's just kind of the nature of TV and entertainment in general. So yeah, we're living in interesting times. It's the Chinese curse, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So that's it. All we have left to do is talk about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So on Monday, October 26th, that was yesterday. We're filming this a day late because my internet went out. But Temple came to Spectrum, and the Creepshow Halloween special came to Shudder. Today, October 27th, Blood of Zeus comes to Netflix. This is kind of like, it looks like it might be from the same studio that did like the Castlevania animated series. It looks very similar, but it's like a Greek mythology kind of animated series, like Western anime style thing. And Shots comes to HBO Max, and This Is Us on NBC. On Wednesday, October 28th, American Housewife comes to ABC. On Thursday, October 9th, Deutschland 89 comes to Sundance. On Friday, October 30th, The Mandalorian returns to Disney+. The Challenge, ETA, comes to Prime, and Truth Seekers to Prime, and Subera to Netflix. Only note here is that we are going to be talking about The Mandalorian. That's starting up this Friday, so we're going to be talking about that on next week's podcast. And we're going to be doing that week to week until that show's done, or we get sick of it or something. I don't know. Whatever comes first.
Whatever happens.
Until Pedro Pascal walks off set, apparently.
Yeah. When he's done, I'm done.
Yeah. Then we'll find something else, if that's the case. If not, then we'll just keep watching. On Sunday, November 1st, Roadkill comes to PBS. On Monday, November 2nd, The Good Doctor comes to ABC. On Wednesday, November 4th, The A-Word comes to Sundance, and Love and Anarchy to Netflix. On Thursday, November 5th, Be Positive to CBS, Mom to CBS, Young Sheldon, your favorite, Will, will, to CBS.
Oh, absolutely.
Save Me to Peacock, and Paranormal to Netflix. On Saturday, November 7th, Gimisetto comes to Adult Swim. On Sunday, November 8th, Moonbase 8 to Showtime. And the 2 NCIS shows come back to CBS. That's Los Angeles and New Orleans. And on Monday, November 9th, Industry comes to HBO. So that's it. That's what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. As I mentioned, next week we're going to be talking about season 2 of The Mandalorian. We're going to be talking about the first episode because that's all that will be out by that point. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Tyson Gifford. You can follow Will. He is at Voxel Hero. You can check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel as well as our site, thetotalscreen.com. You can subscribe to the podcast through any major podcast client like iTunes or Pocket Cast. And the entire backlog of our podcast is available on our YouTube channel. Thank you everybody for listening. Good night.
Good night.
If you would like to reach out to us and make a comment, send an email to contact@thetotalscreen.com. Stay tuned to The Total Screen for the very best in genre